If only I had a penny every time a spiritual person has come over and told me that the purpose of life is that there is no purpose. And not the spiritual people. I think this is the most common answer even materialists, even realist people give, that the purpose of life is that there is no purpose. Life is what you make of it. And while there's a part of me that appreciates that answer, I really do appreciate it at some level. My own meditations, my own understandings have led me to understand that there is more to life than that. And there is a much better way to answer this question rather than simply say there is no purpose to life and life is simply what you make of it. Because I think that answer itself is subject to so many misinterpretations that I would not want to say that to anyone and everyone. Having said that, there are a lot of videos already on my channel around the purpose of life, but today's video is an especially special one because today we have Rocco Jarman talking us about the purpose of life in light of his model of stable mutual actualization. This is in continuation of the consciousness series Rocco and I are putting together on the Unlearning Playground. Now, this one came up specifically after the last video invited a lot more questions, invited a lot more powerful and potent questions. Having said that, this video and the videos previous to this one are all standalone videos and can be consumed independently because they have crystal clear messages in their own rights. So, consume today's video, and even if you haven't checked out the previous videos, you can check them out at the end of this one. For now, let's get into it. Hello, Rocco. Good afternoon.
Chetan,
Good
hey
afternoon.
brother. It is afternoon for me as well. Actually, that's good. And I've got the blue lights on today.
The setup looks slick, man, really.
Oh, it looks
We're,
better for
we're
sure.
going pro.
Definitely
We're going pro now.
by increment. By increment.
Yes. Yes. We're agiling into it.
That's it. Now we had quite a deep chat today, and
Mm.
as so often the case, we realized that the conversation ought to have been recorded. But then we also figured out how we want to serve the audience better today.
Yes. Yes.
I don't
Yes.
know if you
Yes.
want to just frame that project.
Yes. Definitely. So the last conversation we had, which is an ongoing series on the Unlearning Playground right now, is centered around the topic of consciousness, specifically
Mm.
around what is consciousness, why we need to upgrade our consciousness, what are the different ways to upgrade our consciousness, about which you had something absolutely profound to share. You shared that there have been historically or in an evolutionary manner, there have been two ways which we have almost been subscribed to, in the sense that there is one way of the Zen Buddhists or the Hindus, which is the way of the no self, an absolute surrender of your will, hmm? Absolute surrender of yourself. And then the other way is, I think your words were absolute alignment way, complete alignment way to the will of nature, to the will of the mother.
Mm. Well,
And
incremental, but the thing that you were in training or aligning to was, let's
mm,
call it the mother. It's the cadence
mm,
of and the reality of nature.
yes. So the end goal of those two projects is that one is the no self way, one is the complete alignment way. And you brought out a third path, which you were talking about, which is a, a path of spiritual attainment where you also retain a self and you act
That's
out with
right.
that self in the world, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
today morning, like you said, we had a deep, profound conversation offline where I was questioning you about that middle path. And my questions specifically were around, let's say there's someone in the world right now who's working a day job, who has his kids to feed and um, a partner to think about, friends to care about, etc. What would
Mm.
that middle path look like for such a person, right?
Yeah.
And yes, that is where we wanted to talk about because
Sure.
we thought we'll do more service and more justice to our viewers if we talk about that middle path in some more detail. And that's it.
Yeah, and also thought the way that we were going to talk about it was going to change a little bit. So instead of me
Mm,
just rambling for an hour, you are very good at keeping in mind the persona of the audience
mm,
and where they can meet us in these concepts. Otherwise, the
mm,
concepts are too dense and too elevated. So, how do we bring it down and condense it for that? Now,
yeah.
I'm bad at policing that thought stream, but you're very
Mm,
good at that.
mm,
So if you can keep holding that line for them,
yeah.
then we can make this a much more, we can serve the listener and the viewer better in that way.
Yes.
So that's one of the things that we wanted to do. And the second thing I just wanted to mention was how I arrived at this idea of a path of self. So it's not
Mm,
that those two are the only two spiritual projects that have ever been,
mm,
but you can almost imagine that Christianity was a form, for example, a form of formalized mysticism.
okay.
And
Can you talk more about that, Rokodu? Formalized
yeah,
mysticism?
sure, because at the end of the day, what you're hoping to be is in communion with the Creator.
Mm,
Um, but they're gonna redeem some aspect of you so that
mm,
your soul can be lifted up and you can make the grade somehow. That's the project.
mm.
And
Okay.
then, Hinduism is another strong project as well. And that project has many sub projects, but one of them is a path of practice, which is, again, the aim is to make contact with your own best or highest or purest self, the Atman,
Mm,
or the path of devotion where you look at the whole of Godhead through the lens of something which speaks to you most personally. That could be Hanuman as an archetype or as a god. Now, there's two ways of looking at that. You can either take it very literally, which a lot of Hindus do, or you can take it in a kind of as a metaphorical allegory, and you can see that all that you're doing is you're connecting with an aspect of the all through the lens of that icon,
Atma.
that Godhead.
Mm,
Now,
mm.
that's a project that's been shared in many traditions.
Yeah.
And basically, if you look at what they did in ancient Greece, that's a great example. The gods in ancient Greece, we worship them more as if they were the ones that controlled the order of things in the world. But
Mm,
it wasn't that one god wanted to topple the other one. They each had their own jobs to do in the organization, right?
mm,
And
mm,
so we respected that multiplicity.
mm. And that is a concept actually Hinduism also borrows a lot of traditional,
100%. In fact,
right?
it might actually be the other way around, knowing that
Mm,
everything has Proto Indo European roots, is that
mm,
some of that one assumes actually it came
mm,
probably more from India than
mm.
the other way around. Yeah.
Okay. But also, I like what you mentioned there because actually, if you look at traditional Indian epics, you would see parts of characters that are displayed there. There are actually parts of those characters who are trying to topple the gods. It may not be the gods trying to topple each other, but there are certain asuras or certain demons who are trying to topple the gods.
That's
And
right. But
mm,
that more had to do with Chetan, the establishment of order,
mm,
which all religions had,
mm,
and then the toppling or the challenge of that order. So it was really a battle between order and chaos,
mm, mm,
which
mm.
in some instances we called good and evil.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Those were the words that were coming up for me too. Yeah,
Correct.
good and evil.
But the main thing that I'm trying to point to is that those religions had intermediaries like a kind of priest who will do they're in between you and the God, or
Yeah.
somebody's
Mm.
telling you the rules that you have to follow, but you're living your daily life.
Uh-huh.
But the aim is still to integrate with the will of the gods in such a way that you can align your life with the will of the gods.
Mm.
So
Okay.
even though it
Okay.
wasn't the path of the mother, let's call that the path um, of the father, the solar father, where we were trying to follow what the gods wanted, and that's how we lived a virtuous life, and that's how we would thought we would get to the end of something under the
Mm.
graces of the gods. It's
Mm.
still a question. Let's
Mm.
just remind the listeners here. It's still a question of no one's analyzed it this way, but I'd like us to do that today. the thing that you have is
mm,
really your will and how you want to invest it and spend it.
mm,
Now, the Buddhist project, which we call the path of surrender, is about using the will that you have to slowly and incrementally liberate yourself from this illusion of self so that
mm,
you can surrender this idea of selfhood completely and thereby achieve liberation in yourself.
mm, eh,
The idea of
mm,
Hinduism is to achieve moksha or
mm,
liberation that way, but that's
mm,
just to liberate yourself from the illusion of the Maya, but you still connect with your pure Godhead's selfhood, right?
mm. And
the
actually,
project
okay, go on.
the
I'll come back.
projects of Christianity and all of that had to do with there was no concept of reincarnation, the fact that you had many iterations or tries to do this. The whole
Mm,
project is how you live your life now
mm,
determines your sorting in the afterlife, whether you're considered good or bad, or you are
mm,
closer to the gods, or you live in some form of dream or paradise, or you live in some form of purgatory or hell. So the
mm, mm,
project for them was almost how do I act out this leg of the journey so that my eternal leg can be one of grace or one of damnation or punishment or
mm. Okay,
that's
okay.
where those
Mm,
two projects are separate,
mm,
but
mm,
they both have a sameness in them, that they are it's what you're going to do with your will and how you're going to align your will with a higher will
mm,
or a
mm,
greater will.
mm,
Now
mm,
I'm trying to put those kind of religions off to one side, and I'm
mm,
trying to look at what we think of as spiritual projects in today's context.
mm,
We think of the Buddhist project as one of those things,
mm,
and we think of the alignment of maybe not nature worship, but aligning with the will of the cosmos, the mother,
mm,
the that which grants the generosity or the abundance or the graces of life, etc. We want to get in alignment with that.
mm, mm,
But often those projects don't involve building yourself, actualizing in a profound way. In fact,
mm.
actualizing in the modern context is seen as something which is materialistic and
Absolutely.
against the spiritual project. Yeah?
Exactly. Yes, yes,
Mm.
exactly. And that is where actually today morning when we were discussing this, my idea was that when I was revisiting our videos, especially our fourth video where you had talked about the middle path, I could actually relate to it a lot from the perspective of from the persona of an everyday guy who would watch this and say that this is what I'm trying to do anyway. I'm trying to
Yeah.
actualize, myself. I'm trying to actualize what I want to achieve, what I want to become or be in this world. I do not want to let go of everything that is there to be about me, right?
Mm.
And that was actually my question for you. So, do you think that the middle path, the third path that you described, is something that resonates a lot more in the modern age with modern people? And if that is the case, what are the different ifs and buts you would still want to
Yeah.
prescribe to people before they start to
Sure.
misappropriate your path for what they're already
Mm.
doing, right?
Sure.
Mm,
So the reason why we positioned that image before was to say that there's a difference in virtue and in clarity and in alignment with what we think of as spirituality and modern pursuits of actualization today
mm,
versus the projects that I'm talking about. So there is a
mm,
distinction between those two.
mm,
And
mm,
we call them asleep and awakened. We call them unenlightened and enlightened, whatever the
mm,
case is. But
mm,
we need to begin with the premise that awakening and enlightenment, etc., is a question of degrees, not a binary on-off switch. You're not there and then it's all over. It's almost like you reach a certain waterline, and when you breach that waterline
mm,
and you start operating beyond that waterline or that level, then it's degrees of awakening from there, right?
mm. And Rocco, help me understand this better because the way I understand it is that you're right in saying that it's degrees of awakening, but it's not that your bodily requirements or your everyday requirements or your everyday needs take a step back after you have achieved a certain level of awakening. So if I talk in terms of Maslow hierarchy of needs, the basic needs will always need to be taken care of. It's almost, I find it to be a misconception that people feel that if you're aligned towards a spiritual life, you don't care about your basic needs at all. You don't need to take care of your basic needs at all. And if somehow a spiritual person is doing that, they are not really spiritual.
That's one of the myths that we're here to
Yeah.
break. And
Mm,
that myth is propagated by our idea of a sage, somebody
mm,
who has some form of mystical life where they live as a hermit, they live very simply. And
mm,
what we're specifically talking about is somebody who wants or is called. They haven't even
mm.
maybe realized that this is true about them, but when we say it, they'll recognize it as true. That they're called to live an integrated life, integrated in the form of a family or a job or a personality and community and a relationships, etc. And they find that no less meaningful than their spiritual project. And the real question for them is how they integrate those two without giving one of them up.
Yes, yes,
That's
yes.
that's what. So
That's it. Yeah.
that's the project we're talking about now.
Mm,
Two confusions arrive. The one confusion is Maslow's hierarchy of needs is about actualization.
mm,
But our understanding of what Maslow was trying to say, what is generally taught, is incomplete, even by Maslow's standards. Maslow extended beyond that, but only half of what he's talking about, only a portion of what he's discussing
mm.
is peddled. Like if you do a psychology or sociology degree, that's what they will teach you is just the bit, just the pyramid. And they
Okay.
won't define actualization properly even,
Mm, mm, mm. So
you know?
I think that is the thing to talk about.
Correct.
No? Mm,
And then there's a second thing that I want to explain
mm,
is that we almost took a leaf out of that. Like everyone knows what Maslow's hierarchy of needs are, and we all understand actualization in that context. But
mm,
we've never actually stopped and really understood properly what it means. Our language
mm,
is too small for the actual pursuit of that project in an intelligent way. And so what we lack sometimes is a form of discernment. Yeah. So
mm,
even if
mm,
somebody
mm.
says your basic needs remain the same, then beyond a certain level of awakening, the myth is that you don't have the same basic human needs. You definitely do. You still need to take a shit and wipe. It's always going to be the same. But probably you're making the implication, at least one should hope, is that you're making what we would call more enlightened choices about such things and you have more
Mm,
enlightened habits. Your
mm, mm,
footprint of what you do karmically in the world
mm,
is something that isn't as careless or as unconscious,
mm,
perhaps, as it
mm,
once was. Let's assume
mm,
that that's at least a
mm,
fact.
mm, mm,
But
mm.
are you familiar with the word valence?
Valence. I've heard it in
Valence.
my organic chemistry lessons back in my school days.
Right. So let's just get a valence definition.
Mm,
Valence is relating to what's a simple definition? Valence in human behavior. Valence refers to the the pleasantness or unpleasantness of an emotional stimulus. It
mm,
also we regard something as whether it's negative or not, or how much meaning perhaps it carries to us. So
mm.
let's say, for
Okay.
example, when you've been doing running for a long time, jogging, and you become fit, those sensations that you felt when you started running, you still feel them, but the intensity, the valence, the way it pushes on your attention, you
Mm,
become more sort of equanimous or more used to about it. You have a different relationship. You don't call it bad the way you once did.
yeah, yeah.
You know, if
Mm,
somebody likes to drink whiskeys or if they like to listen to metal music, if you took
mm,
somebody who's only ever listened to um, gentle Hindu hymns, right?
mm,
And
mm, mm,
suddenly you put them in a thrash metal concert, their ears will bleed
mm,
metaphorically.
mm,
But
mm,
if
mm.
somebody grew up listening to that, that intensity doesn't have the same valence for them.
Ah, okay,
Right.
okay. Mm,
So your
mm, mm,
basic needs in the hierarchy of needs, I would say, stay the same.
mm, mm, mm,
But what doesn't stay the same is the valence. So you still have
mm,
hunger, but
mm,
you are not assailed by your hunger.
mm,
You
mm,
still
mm,
feel discomfort, but you can distance yourself from some of that discomfort, so
mm,
that
mm.
the draw card that social status would have. You still want to be accepted by society and community to a degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is still something that you want to belong to, but the valence of how that used to feel would
Yeah.
have changed because
Yeah.
there's a different discernment that you now have in that project. Does
Mm.
that make sense?
It does, Rocco. And in fact,
Right.
while you were saying that, I was also reminded. I think there is one more myth that you're sort of alluding to, which is what people feel when I'll be there, spiritually there. None of this will even turn up in my consciousness. Like, I won't ever feel even the emotions, the bad emotions of jealousy, shame, fear, etc., will never turn up in
Yeah.
my consciousness.
Yeah.
And I
The
don't think that
valence
is
of it will change.
the valence will change. It's not that
Yes.
those feelings will disappear completely, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And
so
then,
there will also be, we are not just one constant flat line of, we are a fluctuating reality in of
mm,
ourselves. And so
mm,
one day, my consciousness or my awareness is just compromised because of I ate
yes,
bad food or I had
didn't
bad night's
sleep.
sleep or I'm
Yeah,
fatigued in some way or I'm
yeah,
distracted. And then
yeah,
something can affect me better and worse than others.
yeah, yeah,
We need to understand that that is more reasonable. But
yes,
so what we want to distinguish now is in this project of actualization that we are referring to. That is what the path of self actually is. It is actualization. Now, actualization with a small a
mm,
is anything that you have an ambition for, that you can work at, and that you can actualize or realize in your life. Because actualize just means it's something actual
mm, mm,
that you have
mm,
helped,
mm.
like realize. I've
Yes,
made it
yes,
real in my life, right?
yeah, yeah, mm.
But actualize with a capital A is everything that we can invest our energy and
Mm,
our attention
mm,
into over
mm,
time that
mm.
has nothing to do with our base needs.
Say that again,
That
Rocco,
is
please.
have everything to do with a sense of calling or a sense of profound intentionality inside of
Mm,
us.
mm,
That's what
mm,
we
mm,
mean by actualization. It's what we want to become intrinsically, not what we want to have,
mm,
what we want to be.
mm,
I want to have a form of attainment or a form of becoming.
mm,
And it's the problem is that has to be something that almost only we can appreciate and recognize until we begin to share that as a gift in the world. Then other people can appreciate and experience that as well. But what it cannot be by definition is a formula that you inherit from the crowd or from other people. So you might be called to actualize as a violinist, right? But it becomes a craft and a calling. And yes, you still look like a violinist, but there are ways that you can express your craft or practice or talk about your journey in ways that are different from someone who's just classically training to be a very good violinist. And it's not to say that the one is better than the other. It's just the
mm,
one is what we call actualization, and the other one is just called pursuing an ambition. And they are different things. We need to understand that these two are different things. They are different projects.
mm,
Now, when
mm,
you normally
mm.
ask a young person, how are you going to actualize? It's always, almost always through borrowed tropes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm,
It's in these categories. It stems basically from that first time you ask a child at school, what do you want to become? And they say, I want to become a fireman.
yeah.
First of all, you lack the wisdom to understand what it is that you want to become one day. And secondly, your lexicon, your language, your models of what's possible
Mm,
at 7 years old, what the do you know, right?
yeah, yeah.
And exactly the same way, this is one of those things we spoke about earlier on. If you look at who you were 15 years ago,
Mm, mm,
if you inspected, just think for a moment, and I invite the audience to listen as well. Think for a moment what you thought your most important things in life were 15 years ago, what you wanted to become. And think about the difficult things that have happened to you that you wouldn't maybe wish they would be repeated or wish them on somebody else, but you can recognize how you grew as a person by experiencing and passing through that. Right.
mm,
If you had to explain what you value as wisdom and sensibility and equanimity and grace and all of these forms of understanding, this maturity that you have now today, and go speak to yourself from 15 years ago. First of all, if you are able to have a conversation with no loss of valence or context, it means you haven't grown.
Mm.
And if you have, it means you have grown. Now, do you think that that one from you 15 years ago would understand how you perceive the world today? They have no view on that reality
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
took all those days of experiences and hard knock and disappointments and heartbreak and all those things. Excuse
Mm.
me.
Mm. Mm.
I don't want to mess up my mic here. I've still got the right microphone. Yeah.
It's
All
okay.
those things for you to become the wiser, greater, more experienced version of yourself than you are today.
Mm.
But in the same way, that somebody from 15 years ago, whatever television they were watching, whatever computer screen they had, remember our screens were 14-inch. Then somebody once had a 17-inch and it was, oh my God. Then a 22-inch came out. Then it was, we
Mm.
just got bigger and bigger and bigger and
Mm.
clearer and clearer and clearer. But the person from 15 years ago, the laptop and the operating system or the phone that they never had that phone in their hand, the latest version, and said, oh, this is shit. I wish I had the phone from 2024. They didn't
Mm.
think like that. You
Yeah.
don't think over the horizon of what's possible, right?
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Which means if you are setting an ambition from yourself, for yourself, that you think you are actualizing for now,
Mm.
you are doing it from a place of what has to become ignorance because the whole point of the journey is to grow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
as much as you've changed in the last 15 years, if there is that potential for change again in the next 15 years, and who might you still become? And the point
Mm.
is, you are becoming that by accident
Mm.
because life is just tumbling you one way or the next, or the algorithm is telling you what to watch and what to pay attention to. And life is moving at such an insane pace that you are actualizing in a lowercase a.
Mm.
But what is deciding what you become and how you become is just the shape of the landscape that you are stumbling through. And the direction that you are pushed in, even without, it's not that you're making these intelligent choices. And where you think you're making choices
Mm.
without the requisite wisdom and understanding and discernment to read the landscape and realize what is a self? Where does this boundary of me end and begin? If I know that the internet, for example, and social media and the algorithm is a system of control, the way that news is fed to me, the way that media is telling me what to think and how to feel, if you understand at a very basic level that that is a system of control, is there no part of you that stands up and says, whoa, I don't want to be controlled. I want to be able to steer my own life and make my own choices. And then you sit with that question. That question says, well, what is a me? What am I? What am I? How am I? What,
Mm.
where's the beginning and the end of me in this? And how can I steer this little thing? Right now, we've been dragged to the edge of that question by the madness of the world and by this normalization of individuation.
Mm.
You listen to your Spotify streams, you
Yeah.
watch your Netflix feeds, you look at your social media feeds. It's you. And
Mm.
everything for the last 20 years has been telling you that you are a sovereign you and you can make your choices and you can choose for you and you can decide this and you can decide that. It's the age of the self.
Mm. Mm.
And
Mm.
with the age of the self, then comes the need for a path of the self, because we are all walking around aimlessly becoming something that we are not going to be proud of at the end.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
That
Mm.
is
Mm.
based
Mm.
on somebody else's formula. And if you don't know how to tell what's you and what are your own questions, are you happy with that? I wasn't happy with that. And that's why I started thinking to myself, fuck, I had a spiritual calling, but I didn't want to abandon my life. I also felt called to be here and be a self. And then the hard work of what it is to forge a self in this pain and this chaos and this confusion of a modern life means you invest in becoming. And when you invest in becoming, the last thing you want to do is surrender that now to some spiritual system of just floating on a cloud. I don't want that. I want to be me.
Mm.
Now, that sounded to everybody that I spoke to like a selfish project. And then I
You
thought
can say
maybe I'm
that.
a
Yeah.
bad person. But then I inspected myself and I just thought, well, I can't change that truth. In fact, that is a truth for me.
Yeah.
To not do that would
Yeah.
be a denial of my truth. Is that ego? Is that ego?
It's it's beyond ego. You can.
Well, then I had to understand what an ego was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's basically how I got onto this journey. And so I
Mm.
was looking for this invisible intersection that wasn't well described by anyone else in the world of how you retain your selfhood, what it means to be a self, and how you do that in a way that doesn't tread karmically on somebody else's ability to also actualize as a self. And so I came up with a model of stable,
Stable, mutual.
mutual actualization. Why is it stable? It's stable
Yeah.
because you are doing it in an agile way. You are building actualize, integrate, actualize, integrate, like the segments of a shell. You know, when you see a spiral shell growing out like that, it doesn't just
Mm.
explode into the spiral cone. It does it by segment.
Mm.
Small, then the big builds on the small, then the bigger builds on the slightly bigger one, and it builds incrementally. And I saw that as a signature in the universe to say that's how you actualize. But
Mm.
then that can happen in the context of a family, a relationship, a team, a friendship, a community, and the whole species can do that. So, what makes it stable is two things. We'll get back to the second one. The second thing, it has to be mutual because the golden rule told me do only what you wouldn't mind being done to you. Make the quality of choices show up in the world in a way that you wouldn't be concerned on the receiving end of the quality of choices that you're making.
Mm. Mm.
That's
Mm.
what do unto others actually fully means. We've been over this a few times, and I also took a few things to heart, like start in the heart and love over fear and stuff like that. And that said to me that it has to be mutual. It has to be in a way that makes room for others to do it too. And again, that wasn't noble or high-minded. It was simply because I was truthful to myself to say, what kind of world do you want to live in? Well, I want to live in a world of interesting people. I like interesting artists.
Just pause. Just pause here for 1 second and reflect on what the true invitation is. The true invitation from this conversation right now is not to drop all of your ambitions, but rather to question your ambitions. It's merely to question your ambitions and question them for whom? Question them for yourself. Because you need to find out whether they are really your ambitions. You will see when you sit back and question all of your thoughts, all of the things that you've been chasing throughout your life so far, you will realize that a lot of the ambitions that we have been chasing, a lot of the small actualizations that we are gunning for in our life, that we are so stressed about in our daily lives, a lot of them are actually borrowed ambitions. They're not our own ambitions. Now, that's something to think about, isn't it? Think about it. Let's keep going in the conversation again. The next part is absolute code. Hmm. So, Rocco, on that, you were talking about, let's continue, stable, mutual,
Mutual
actualization.
actualization, that's right.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
what makes it mutual is the fact that you're making room for others. Now, our
Hmm.
current forms of actualization with a little a don't even regard other people. We have the spirit
True.
of capitalism and the spirit of the influencer,
Yeah.
which if we inspect it, is the spirit of empire, which means make yours bigger, take from others, build
Yeah.
it, and you get endless growth.
Yeah.
That's not possible.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
possible.
Hmm.
And if somebody else was doing that, it would slowly compromise me or disenfranchise me, which means that's not mutual, right?
Hmm.
And the second way it's stable is if it's mutual, because if it's not mutual, what eventually happens is revolution.
Yeah. There
Somebody
we'll talk.
eventually cracks the shits,
Yeah.
and then structures topple down, and then we have to rebuild them again. And that can't be an intelligent way forever for human beings to operate. It
Yeah.
cannot be,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Hmm.
stable and mutual, and they have to be part of the mix.
Hmm. 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 And Rocco, when you were describing this to me, one of the questions that were coming up was, I have some friends. I have some friends who I have honest conversations with, who give me this feeling that at the very core of their being, they don't want to become anything. They don't want to. actualize in this sense. So ever since I have had that conversation with you about consciousness and these three parts, broad three parts, I can somehow visualize that this will be a possibility in the world, that the middle path will not resonate with some people, and maybe, tell me if I'm wrong, but maybe this friend of mine who's talking about not feeling like becoming anything and feeling like he is here just to experience, not to become anything, just to experience, just to be, and just to see, and just to experience and feel, and all of that.
Mm.
That is the path of the mother, or the path of the no self. Could be either. I mean,
I think it's just no path yet. They're just
mm,
here to like hit XP,
escape a lot.
experience points in the game.
Acha, okay.
They don't have a
Okay.
main quest.
Yeah. Yeah.
They like open world games where you just plod along. He doesn't
Yeah.
realize it, but that's part of a greater arc of the actualization of the soul. And sometimes in my thinking, and I can't prove this to be true, but it makes an awful lot of sense to me, that if you look at the way Hinduism frames the alchemy of the soul over lives, and the way Buddhism does as well, it makes room for the possibility that we come here more than once. And we do this iteratively on a grander scale as well, not just year by year, but iteratively over lives. Makes sense to me. And that fits in karma and reincarnation and dharma. And you have a dharma for this life, and then you have a dharmic arc over many lives. And every now and again, maybe you don't come here to crush it. Maybe you're not the kind of soul that is called to become, make a mark, leave a mark. You just want to, you're here for the ride.
Yeah.
I've got no argument with that.
So
But I
it
would
is.
rather, for those of us that are called to shape the future that we will inhabit, and our future generations will inhabit, I'm still living by the golden rule, saying if I was such as he, what would I want? I would still want those around me who are shaping reality to shape a fun one, a good one, a wholesome one, a promising one, one that makes more meaning and less regret. So this is not a moralizing to say, well, if you're on the mother path, you're a weakling. And if you're on the surrender path, you're a surrender monkey. And if you're just here to kick the tires, then around. And once upon a time, I used to think like that, but I've wisened up as well to realize, who am I to say what their dharmic choices are or their dharmic alignment is? I can't. I can guess. And sometimes when I speak with people like that, it turns out that what they're saying is actually an expression of fear. I'm not saying it's him,
Yeah. Yeah. I
but
understand.
they're
Totally
afraid
understand.
of, because we spoke about this earlier, the path of self means that at some point you have to start making choices for yourself, and you can't inherit what you should do, what you ought to do, what you ought to choose, what is better or worse for yourself in terms of wisdom decisions or investments of energy or attention. And sometimes people default to, just because they're afraid of making mistakes that cause you
Yeah.
regret.
Yeah.
And they've convinced themselves that the easier path, the path to least regret, is to don't push ahead, you just go with the flow.
Yeah.
That's a safety play.
Yeah.
I feel like that in phases of my life too. Maybe they're in a long phase of that. Maybe their whole life is such a phase. Maybe they just haven't been they haven't arrived at the kind of thing that hits them with a catalyst that makes them want to change.
Yeah.
So, for example, I know some people are bumbling along in their life. They get a sense of kind of meaninglessness until they get challenged at work, until they get kicked out of their apartment and have to go find another plan, until they meet a woman who says, no, I want to go get her. Then they are kind of like forced into a form of actualization, or they have children, and that forces something else in them as well. I don't think there's anything right or wrong with that. And I would need to know more about that person, have a more frank and honest conversation to be able to determine that. But that might be a reality for them. Now,
Yeah.
we're speaking to people for whom this doesn't come as a surprise, that this makes sense to them. They go, yeah, I want that. And they might not see it as a spiritual project. But I think that's really all spirituality is discovering your own form of authenticity and genius and your own calling from a Dharma perspective and figuring out how to pursue that in a way that's in alignment with your integrity and alignment with your authenticity. And it's going to get you to the end of this life, certainly, that if you had to add up all your experiences and all your choices, and somebody had to ask, if you had your time again, which of these choices or experience would you tally up under the column of, yeah, I would do them again, they had great meaning for me, or I wouldn't do them again, I have some regret about this, some existential regret, and I don't know where to put that regret, actually.
So, Rocco, that begs the question from... Okay, go on, finish your thought.
No. I think that I reached the point,
Okay. I think this begs the question, how does one go about finding the path that resonates the most with them? So, I mean, I don't want to be absolutely certain. I know these are going to be fuzzy definitions.
Can't be prescriptive,
Can't be prescriptive. But someone listening to this right now is at least interested, is at least, this is resonating somewhere with them, but they want to know, how do I go about finding what resonates with me? How do I go about finding what was inherited by my parents or an algorithm? You get the gist, right?
Yeah.
How do I go about finding my own thing?
The first thing you have to do is audit your beliefs.
Audit your beliefs.
An auditor is somebody who comes in and looks at things, and if people are busy doing a process, they think it's okay, but the auditor will come and say, oh, actually, this is where the line of clarity is, and you're kind of doing something that's deviating from that. Or you thought it was this, but when we did the actual stock take, it turned out to be that. And so you have to do an inventory of your beliefs.
And be objective
and there's
about
ways
it.
to do that, right? There's questions to ask. Now, we can put together those questions maybe and insert them. But I'll give you one example. You simply ask somebody, what did love look like as a child?
Oh, yes.
When you think of love, what was modeled to you as a child?
Oh, there's so much in that question, man. Yeah.
You can sit and think about that, and then you say to yourself, all right, if you compare that to how you are showing your self-love, or what can you see informing your understanding? Because remember, the allegory of Plato's cave is we inherit a narrative and a story. We're all chained up together looking at the back wall of the cave, and there's a scenario going on, and we're looking at shadows, but we don't know that what we're looking at are shadows. We think that's the whole truth and the whole picture. So all you have to do is understand that Plato's cave is a thing, and then realize that your models can be imprecise.
So that question, what did love look like as a child,
Yes.
will lead you to interrogating what you are accepting for yourself as love now.
Yeah, it's part of a question and part of an answer, and it's not a whole of in of itself, but it begins a conversation. And so the main thing is you're now beginning the conversation, right? And you're open to that conversation. The second one might be, what did forgiveness look like as a child? In other words, what were you expected to offer up as an apology, and what were you expected to accept or receive as an apology?
So that actually also begs the question, what was considered wrong as a child for you?
Begins to open that, but it's always, it's actually about guilt and blame and shame.
Yeah.
What did friendship look like? What was an example of a good man and a good woman? And then you realize that so much of what you are walking around with is an inherited story. In the context of a relationship, the questions I like to ask are you in the kind of relationship, or are you in the kind of job, or are you living the kind of life that you would want for your best friend or for your child? That's one of those kind of questions.
Yeah, I love that, man. Sometimes I like to spin that question into, would you want that for your nephew or your niece? I mean,
correct.
You know, correct. A little bit of a
anyone
distance
that you have pure goodwill for.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't just be your best friend, but someone that you have pure goodwill for.
Yeah.
Are you making the quality of choices? Are you guiding yourself? Are you living a kind of life? Are you in the kind of job? Are you in the kind of relationship? Are you on the kind of path that you would want for someone who you cared for enormously? And then the question is, why do you not care for yourself enormously? It begs a lot of questions. So the lovely thing is, the relationship one, I love, because there's two ways of asking that question. The one is, are you in the kind of relationship you would want for your best friend? And the second thing is, are you the kind of person that you would want to be in relationship with?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. Yes.
They're such powerful, clarifying questions, and they knock you off. And there's many such questions that you can ask, right?
Yeah.
In fact, in the Unlearning Playground, we could easily create a resource and share with people that we can host on your website or mine, which are just questions, beautiful questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Questions that can make or unmake a life.
Yeah.
Questions that can make or unmake a life.
And then, Rocco, what I was envisioning when you were talking about these questions was, so at the root of it all, what we're trying to do is become more self-aware, become more aware of your own self, and kind of peel out the layers, those onion layers, and what lies underneath you. So you're getting to what you really are at the core of your being. What are you as a person?
Yeah.
Asking these questions, the answers that turn up. And then parallelly, it could also be that you are a person who is doing this project of becoming more self-aware, so becoming more aware of what you want as a person, how much of it is inherited, etc. But there are also prescriptions available to everyone in the modern age, that this is what a good man looks like, or this is what a spiritual path looks like.
So much distortion there, because some of it's political,
Yeah.
some of it's religious, some of it's moralistic, some of it's philosophical, some of it's just like cultural layover of what's normalized. And this actually begins to touch on the problem. The problem is that if you imagine the operating system, the platform, is the human psyche, how we think and feel, right? How we think and feel, not just what we think and feel, how we think and feel, and what shapes and guides that thinking and feeling, right? Those are our stories and our paradigms and our narratives, right? That complex, that mind, psyche, and body with the nervous system and the emotions and stuff, that's the one having the experience. The self is a combination of those three things, and that has the ability to make choices for itself and see itself as a separate self. When you have your thoughts, they are your thoughts. When you experience pain, it's your pain. That is what we call a self. But there's aspects to that self. It's not that you have a mind and that you have a psyche and you have a body. It's when you have a body with a psyche and a mind and the sense of agency and selfhood, that's what a self is. Now, how present you are in your body, how present and aware you are of your psyche and those stories, right? And how present you are with the quality and the clarity of your thoughts is one part of that project, right? But that collectively, imagine that you have a massive circuit or a massive system made up of 8 billion of such little units. Yeah. And on that collective system is running the Islam software, the Christian software, the Hinduism software, and the corporate business software, and the Western software, and the social media software, and the cultural softwares. The problem is all of those operating systems are running on the same platform, but they are not compatible with each other. And they are incoherent sometimes in themselves because they're not relating to what is unfolding as reality. In other words, if you are a strict Christian and you follow and this goes true for Islam as well, if you are strict in your religion and you're following the book exactly as it was written, there's no ways that tracks the modern reality. In fact, you have to always interpret this, because they're telling you how to look after slaves and what you should do with your donkey. We're not running around with slaves and donkeys. We're running around with cell phones and social media accounts. And how do you track all the complexity that we're living with onto that old operating system? It doesn't work very well. So it's incoherent. So it's not integrated in each other, all these disparate systems.
mm,
Because you're supposed to be a good Christian in the West, but you're also supposed to be like this go-getter, um, building your own brand and um, crushing it at life and having the car and the house and
mm,
these things actually don't work together. And the only people for whom it work are the people who are pretending
mm,
the spiritual
yeah,
game, but are
mm,
completely sociopathic and taking for themselves and clamoring all over everyone else. And you're here trying to play the honorable game, assuming everyone's doing that.
mm, mm,
But the
mm,
person that's tied up in a knot is you. If you are feeling poor mental health, you are experiencing a clash of different paradigms and operating systems running on your platform that are incoherent, and you think you are the problem. You're not the problem. You're trying to integrate and run too many things that don't have compatibility between them. They're not integrated naturally, but you're trying to make them cohere in you. And every failure to do so, you point a finger at yourself. That's what the modern Western age is. This age of self has that as a shadow. And
mm,
so, what the actual invitation is from consciousness is for you to upgrade your understanding of yourself and upgrade your consciousness so that you can manage this new inherited will and superpower that you have to create your reality and to create the life that you want to live and to actualize. But you need to do that. You can't just give somebody the keys to the code and say, just button mash and see what happens. That's what we're doing now,
mm.
right? You need to
Exactly,
know how
exactly.
to
Yeah,
debug that and how
yeah,
to what to
yeah,
select and what, but that takes a form of education. Now,
yeah.
what we're talking about seems so complex,
Mm,
but it's not that I've created a system that's complex. I'm telling you, we are dealing with complexity, and I'm telling
yeah,
you, it takes nuance and understanding,
yeah.
determined understanding that you are building in of yourself and awareness of yourself and the ability to change things in yourself and decode that, debug that code so
And
that,
you know, Rocco,
yeah.
you listen to all of that, like a person listens to all of that, versus they go on YouTube and listen to all of what, let's say, someone like Alan Watts talked about, or someone who interpreted Zen Buddhism talks about. That is almost appearing to me in all of this complexity that we have developed, that we have inherited and helped co-create in 2024. That path almost seems like a very easy path in the sense that I don't want all this complexity. This looks like a simple thing to do, and I'm just going to start to pretend that this is what resonates with me, right?
Now, sometimes you're pretending, and
And
sometimes
sometimes it
that's
is.
and sometimes that's all you've
Ex-
got.
exactly, exactly.
I'm not here
So
to judge which is
yeah,
which. What I am
yeah,
here
yeah,
to say is you will know in your heart.
exactly,
And
exactly.
there are times when you bite off a whole chunk and you try and save the world or change the world. And there's times when the world kicks you, you've got to lick your wounds
Yeah, yeah,
and you've got to come to ground. There's
yeah.
not just one gear here, right?
Correct, correct.
That's why
Absolutely
stable
correct.
mutual actualization has to be increments like agile, where you
Yeah.
do a retro at the end and you ask yourself, what should I keep doing? What should I stop doing? What should I start doing? If I had my time again, what would I like to do? What am I going to try doing for the next cycle? And am I going to keep examining my efforts as I go? Because I'm also hoping that experience, understanding, and wisdom is going to arrive. And maybe as I make my way, I also need to refine my the choices that I'm making and the angle that I'm going at because I'm learning more about that. Sometimes I was going too fast. I need to slow down.
Mm.
Sometimes I was going off in the wrong direction. It took me 2 years to realize that mistake. Terrible mistake to learn, but mistakes are how we learn, right?
And
But when
Rocco,
you, yeah,
when does this or when should this education start?
uh, the whole point of stable mutual actualization is what I've envisioned is that a few individuals start picking this up and practicing it and then realizing it can run my family like this.
Mm.
I can parent like this. I can run my relationship like this. And it starts, and I've got resources for this that can help people do it. I don't know all the answers, but I've spent a lot of time figuring out how it can work.
Yeah.
The nirvana is if we can get companies to operate like this and a community to operate like this and then eventually the planet to operate like this because we're all doing something. What is the harm in us figuring out what we are most called to be like and do in this world, and then make room and organize our institutions and our laws and our rules to facilitate and enable that. It's no worse than any of the things we're doing already. So ideally, when you get to that state, what you will be doing is parents will be both their emotional intelligence and their awareness of such mechanics will be more integrated the way they are today. Like if you imagine people from 500 years ago learning the level of language and maths that we all have as a 12-year-old, their
Yeah.
minds would blow. But they
Correct.
were busy
Correct.
gathering crops out of fields. They didn't have the bandwidth to do that. Now we've got AI coming out of our can do it. So one day I'm hoping that this becomes a normalized fact, right?
Yeah.
Everyone thinks like this. Why not?
Agree.
Then
Yeah.
you can start
Mm.
not just the direct education that you give a child, but how they are welcomed into the world, how you soothe them, how you
Mm.
parent them, even without this. Just parent them by the style of welcoming of that consciousness that still needs to find its own way. How you can keep that tension and not make yourself have to get it right, to try and give them a bit of room to figure themselves out while you're giving them guidance the best way you know how. And also saying to yourself that if there's no right or only ways, but there have to be better and worse ways. And when you make mistake, you own it and solve it as quickly as possible, but you also give yourself permission to make mistakes. And if everyone's operating like that,
Mm.
then we're not investing the enormous amount of energy and attention and bandwidth that we have at the moment on politics and blame and suing each other and fucking around in education, teaching us shit that we're never going to use in our lives. Theoretically, it could begin when you come out the womb,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
I like that, man. I like that a lot. Yeah.
Could
And
do.
permission, that is the key word there, man. I mean,
Very
when you
much.
said giving yourself the permission to actually be vulnerable, to actually take up ownership of whatever shit is going on in your life and how you're going to fix it, and the permission to make mistakes because you will make mistakes. Everyone
Yeah.
does,
And you
right?
have to be in relationship with people that can understand that heuristic. And so
Yeah.
this again points to the idea of initiation,
Mm,
because you need to be initiated into that reality of what
mm,
it means to be a psychological adult. And it's not that
mm,
you're old enough to drive a car or old enough to drink. It's that you understand what it means to be an actual adult. An actual
mm,
adult is someone that is trying to make things better, but they can only do that by making some mistakes.
mm,
And if you
mm,
can accept it about everybody, but everyone is still trying to live by the golden rule, is
mm,
still trying to allow for stable mutual actualization, you're going to be a lot more permissive of things.
mm,
You know?
mm,
And
mm,
then you're also going to be a lot more open to advice and encouragement and correction. If somebody says to you, hey, man, I need to tell you what you're doing is actually selfish or destructive. Now, who the are you to say that? Well, I'm a self. I'm a
mm,
self and I'm an adult and I'm thinking about this. This is my reason. Would you like me to tell you my reasons? I can explain myself. I
mm,
can explain myself. And I can explain my perception of how I think why this wouldn't work if I was doing it, how it clashes with the golden rule for me. Are you interested?
mm,
Now, if someone that's not interested is not an adult,
mm, mm,
and if
mm.
someone says to you, yeah, but you're coming on really strong and I can't listen to you because, it's too critical. Okay, can we find a better way? The point is we're both trying to find a better way. That's what adults do in my framework. A self does. If you want to be on the path of self, you've got to be an adult. You've got to be initiated. You've got to show up and live by a certain code. These are principles. Now, these principles might be refined and changed over time, but they can't be nothing. They can't just be, I feel like doing this, right? There is an area in your life you can run like that. So let's give you an example. If somebody is a painter and they want to become a master painter, that's their way of actualization. They're going to learn from other masters. They're going to learn from their audience. They're going to learn from their mistakes.
Mhm.
And at some point in time, they're going to have to disregard everything that they learned and they're going to have to go off the script. Otherwise, they're not really breaking new ground, right?
Mm,
That's the
mm.
place where you give yourself permission to
Permission.
just you do you.
Yeah.
you know, but you can't do that in ways that rob other people of their sovereignty.
Mm. Mm.
But you can make mistakes. And when someone says, hey, man, you're treading on my sovereignty, then you take accountability and you try and make things right to a point. But there's no such thing as the level of guilt and blame that we put on people today. Like in my framework, there's no victimhood and there's no wokeness. There's no room for it
Mm. Mm. Mm.
because wokeness or victimhood is antithetical to self ownership. Because what you are saying is that you have an external locus of control and everything that goes wrong in your life is somebody else's fault.
And Rocco, I
Hmm.
feel when it comes to victimhood, I wanted to get into that slightly, because when it comes to things like victimhood and uh, calling out your own biases, let's say you're a person who is becoming more and more
So
self.
sorry, Chetan. I just wanted to say that doesn't mean that there aren't real victims of things.
Of course,
I,
yes,
I don't
yes,
want to make that distinction very clear. I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
talking about the entrepreneurship of victimhood.
I appreciate that, man. Yes,
Right.
yes, yeah,
So children can be victims, animal can be victims, any human being can be the victim of injustice.
yeah,
Truly, they can.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
not talking about that. We're talking about when it's a claim for power.
Exactly,
And it's the
exactly.
core game that you're playing. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sorry, please continue.
Yeah. So what I was alluding to was that I'm going to try and frame this question for you. Huh? There is a person who's becoming more and more self-aware, trying to become more aware of their own biases, their own stories in their minds, their own paradigms, to put into your words, of the different levels of the caves, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes what happens for such a person is that merely acknowledging that they have this paradigm and they are living within this paradigm, merely acknowledging that sometimes ends up justifying for themselves what they are behaving like.
So
Do
give
you
me an
understand?
example.
I don't want to get into specific details, man.
Oh, so you're
But
saying that because they're becoming enlightened in a certain way and they see other people aren't enlightened, that gives them permission to disregard other people's will?
mm, no, no, I was not getting to that actually. I'll try again. I'll try again. For a person who's becoming more aware of their stories, I think the so what of that project of becoming more aware of your stories should be to unlearn your attachment to those stories. Number one, should be to subscribe to and upgrade your stories and understand that they are stories, right? That should be the so what of your project of becoming more self aware.
Yes.
Would you like to, right? You agree with me on that?
Yep.
However, someone who's becoming more aware of their stories but does not understand that the so what should be to let go of them, merely the fact that they are becoming aware of their stories just somehow makes them feel like I understand it now, and therefore my stories are justified, and therefore the way I'm acting is justified. Hmm?
It does make a lot of sense. And I'll give you the analogy that I always use. So I use the
Hmm.
idea of debugging software or stepping through. That's a
Hmm.
bit like saying there's a bug showing up. Well, I'm realizing that this is what the intention was, but it's behaving not as intended. But now that I know what the bug is, I'm just going to ignore it.
Okay, let me build on that then. So, someone understands that the way they act in the world with other people is because of whatever happened in their life. Okay,
Ah,
whatever their
ah,
past was, right?
right. So then
And
what they do is they get as far as realizing that there was a cause,
yeah,
but
yeah,
then they go, okay, inquiry's over now. Now that I have a cause, I can wash my hands and move on.
exactly. That's it. That's it.
Yeah,
That is, yeah. So
yeah.
I think that's like a project half done. You. So why I was saying that was because you said that do unto others as you would have
As
others
you
do
would have
unto
a
you. Yeah.
yes,
The entire project of being an adult is centered around that golden rule. But
yeah.
there can be a person who claims to be an adult in the sense that I'm quite aware, I understand myself, I understand all the causes that have led me up till here.
Ah,
But all of this thing is justified, and I'm not going to be the first one to start to behave as
yeah.
if the world is going
Now
to
I
get
have
better,
you. Okay,
right?
so let's just clarify the project of adulthood.
Mm.
So Human beings, at the end of the day, are social animals.
Mm,
Social animals, right?
mm, mm,
But we broke a certain waterline of consciousness and we developed the ability to have story and the ability to have language and the ability to share stories
mm,
and
mm,
to
mm,
transmit our ideas to each other,
mm,
right? And to
mm, mm,
formulate plans and to do something now for future outcomes.
mm, mm. Like
That's the
working
thing
out
that,
for future.
yeah. So I'm going to endure a bit of discomfort or cost now so that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we
Mm,
work this
mm,
out.
mm, mm, mm,
But a self is only a self in the context of other. If you do not realize, if you do not realize that the blessings that you enjoy are based on the efforts of others, you are not an initiated adult. You are not an initiated adult. You have the potential for adulthood because you've got the faculties and the intelligence and the awareness and the understanding of yourself and how you operate and what causes are.
mm.
But who do you think is doing all the lifting and the work and the heavy changing? How are you integrating with community, with society? You don't have to actively integrate, but at least you have to play your part. That's what Dharma is. Play your part.
Yeah,
Do your
yeah.
part. If it's a small part, do it with greatness.
Grace.
And if it's a great part, do it with grace.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And if you think that your actions don't have an impact on other people or that their actions don't have a benefit for you, you're enjoying a peace that was won by the way other people made sacrifices. You are eating meals, you are the inventions that you enjoy, the running water that you enjoy, everything comes off the back of communal efforts. Now, you might have lost your memory of that or never been initiated into the memory of that, but you need to understand the reason that the shoemaker could become an expert shoemaker is because he didn't also have to milk the cow and fetch the wood and chop the wood and build the roof tiles and build the hammer and the nails. We distributed, we delegated those tasks to others. And the complexity of human life is such that you don't understand where all these things come from. That's something we have to change. Now, you can't change that on your own. There was a documentary once where a guy had to make his own cheeseburger. And so he grew the crops, raised the cow, milked the cow, made the cheese, made the bread. It was a cheeseburger. And it took him years to make,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Uh,
We can't live like
wow.
that now.
Yeah.
Right? And you can't make your own energy and you can't pick up your own trash and you can't wash your own laundry. Not all of it. Not all of it.
Mm, mm, mm,
But if you can't also be adding something, and the easiest way for you to add back to that is gratitude, true gratitude, not writing it in a journal, not saying thank you. It's
mm,
waking up to the fact that you are here on the back of all of that investment and sacrifice and contribution, number one. And number two, you are just walking through here expecting it all just to keep working for you without you giving a little bit back. You should be curious about how you are earning your part. Not neurotically out of fear, but you must go to bed at night thinking to yourself, or at the end of every year, whatever it is, and that has to be built into our practices and it has to be built into our traditions, that we are all being reminded of this. That's what the song Om Mani Padme Hum, the energy
mm.
of that song means. It means we're all in an exchange of giving and receiving, and we all belong through that. And the only way you belong to the matrix of this beautiful system is if you are prepared to give with discernment and to receive with grace.
Wow. Give with discernment and receive with grace.
Correct. Because let's say we were all just in a circuit board where there was different streams or currents of abundance or energy or life force or vitality or meaning or whatever it was. And you just gave away everything. You would give to psychopaths and bad people, and you would empower people that will take more than they give. If you receive everything without discernment, then you're not actually helping the function of the circuit. Yes, you need to get as much as you need to get, but you also need to know how to give, who to give to, on what basis to give. That's what it means to be an initiated adult. So when somebody runs up and says, I need your help with this, an adult is somebody who comes with something a capacity, a resource, some form of means, and an adult is always somebody that says, explain your need to me. Tell me. Talk to me. Show me why. Show me how. Because I might just be giving to somebody who's lazy. I might just be giving to somebody who's a liar or taking. I might just be giving to somebody who doesn't actually know how to invest what I'm giving them, and I could have invested it better somewhere else.
Yeah.
Now, life wants us to do three things: avoid pain, pursue pleasure, and conserve energy, which means avoid pain and pursue pleasure in an energy efficient manner. If we didn't do that, we would be careless with the blessings and the gifts we have. And life cannot sustain us all being careless. We have to be more meticulous. We have to be more diligent. We have to be more discerning. And that has to be in everything. Yeah? So to someone like that, I would say, sure, you are not a child and we need to have systems to manage children. But what a strain you are putting on the whole system by not carrying your part. If everybody behaved like you, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If everybody behaved like you, how hard would this be? And how much less blessings would we be able to share? And how much less would we be able to look after the people with the most need? Because we're busy catering for people who are too lazy to grow up or too selfish to grow up. You know?
100%.
You need to understand that a relationship is a self. A community is a self. And that self has needs. And if your one arm started acting like it was more important than your other arm, or one organ started acting, that we call that a cancer. That's what cancer is. Cancer is when something's growing and taking all the resources, but they are growing and multiplying, actualizing in a way that is not for life. It's against the project of being. We call it non-being. And I don't mean non-being in a Buddhist sense. I mean non-being in a actualization sense. And we're all here trying to actualize as beings, but we also want to contribute to a collective being with a high mind and high integrity and high authenticity and high beauty and high meaning. But the cancer
vision to subscribe to.
takes all of that stuff in the project and doesn't realize that it's doing it. Do you know what a cuckoo bird is?
A what?
A cuckoo bird.
No.
In Europe, there's a bird called a cuckoo bird. Cuckoo. They make a cuckoo clock. The clock goes. Right. That cuckoo bird. It's a psychological archetypal trope that we have. The cuckoo bird doesn't raise its own young. It lays its egg in another nesting bird's nest when the mother is away. So sometimes the original egg is this big and the cuckoo's egg is this big, and then the cuckoo hatches quicker because genetically it's adapted to hatch quicker. And it's got these enormous black eyes, and it's this fat bloated thing that eats all the food, and it just sits with this enormous mouth like that, just to take, just this will to receive. And it's genetically programmed to kick the other baby, all the eggs, all the other baby birds out the nest when the mother is not there. And then what it does is it screams at the mother non-stop. Now, the mother is sometimes 1/4 the size of the chick, right? And it works the mother to death to feed it, because the mother's instinct is just to feed need. The mother is wired, programmed. Her little dharma is just to encounter need and cater for it and protect it. But this cuckoo bird, this black-eyed, hungry, ravenous thing, has got an appetite that can never be satisfied. And it doesn't know that it's not into the joke of what it is. It has no self-awareness of its parasitic nature on life. Now, when I tell you that, and I'm telling you now, we are like that on this earth.
And you know what, Rocco? This example, it's so profound, because for someone like the person that I'm talking about, for someone like that person, hearing this story is going to relate more with the mother bird. That I am this victim who is being subjected to so much pain from this world, and I now need to protect myself.
They might be also.
They might be. Yes.
But the point is they also don't apply the whole inquiry. The whole
Yes.
inquiry is, and where am I like this? Because the reason that I'm suffering this is some form of lesson or some form of invitation to a greater understanding or awakening.
Yeah.
You know, we think that love is everything.
Mm.
But Thich Nhat Hanh said, love without knowing how to love wounds the one we love. Love's other name is care. You cannot care for something that you don't understand. You cannot care for yourself. Or if you are in an actualization journey where you are looking after the welfare of your soul, even
Mm.
if it's just for this life, because this is the game that you spawned into now, do you
Mm.
think you are doing that well by choosing ignorance? By You can't be. You
Yeah.
can't be. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so these difficulties come along to invite us into deeper forms of appreciation of the journey that we're on and what we are a part of and what we are dependent on for those blessings and for that grace. And this is why inevitably this project has to have this kind of spiritual aspect to it, because you need to understand that you're part of something bigger.
Yeah. Stable, mutual actualization.
Actualization. And really, if you are going to come back and have another life, let's say, don't you want to come back in an improved version of the game? Not just more technically advanced one, but one
Mm.
where kindness is more integrated and compassion is more integrated and consciousness is more integrated. Yes, you would. The answer is yes, you would. And the
Mm.
question is, therefore, what are you doing about that in this life?
Exactly. 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 Yes.
Now,
Yes.
some people arrive with a kind of reality in their birth or their life or their childhood or whatever, where them just coping and healing is the work.
Mm. Mm.
And some people are called to like just disappear and make music and make art and be an avatar for some form of genius in the world. I think that's perfectly fine. We are going to have souls like that.
Yeah.
We are going to have souls that want to do the surrender path. They're
Mm.
called to do that.
Mm. Mm.
You
Mm.
know, and then
Mm.
we're going to
Mm.
have souls that are called to entrain with nature and with the mother, and we need that too. And then
Mm.
we have souls that are called to actualize and change the
Mm.
game, and then
Yeah.
this path is for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
And we stress on that a lot because I feel, you know, right from the bottom of my heart, Rocco, the spiritual project has become a very tainted one in the modern age.
Yeah, it's
And
stupid.
yes, and therefore, anyone who is, let's say, living in a developed city, state, country, wherever, is at some level disenfranchised with the way traditional religions and spirituality has been practiced. At
Mm.
some level, they are, and therefore, it's almost a given that this is not what resonates with me, and therefore they are a self in the world, and then what your version of improvement is, what your version of advancement and development is, they are contributing to that. But without the discernment and the heart alignment that you talk about, they will end up contributing to the parasite and not contributing to life.
Um, Not necessarily, but we have to admit that there might not be right or only ways, but there have to be better and worse ways. There are more skillful ways of doing things.
Mm, mm,
And
mm, mm,
what will happen now, this is a prediction that you can count on, is that you can know that there is a wiser hand at work when the following plays out. In your life, individually, when you are portraying ignorance, reality will rub up against you, will cause a kind of tension or friction that will force you to awaken.
mm,
You drink too much and you party as a young kid, eventually there'll be consequences. You sleep around, you're going to get an STD. You squander your money, you're going to go broke. That's a form of karma. It's called cause and effect, right?
mm, mm,
And nature cannot sustain this level of growth, this level of taking, this level of unconscious taking. And we are already seeing the implications of that. Life is now too complex for us. It's overwhelming us. The mental health cost is too intense. The systems are becoming more sophisticated and taking more and compromising people's sovereignty more and more and more. It's like the pot getting warmer and the frog doesn't know because it's only going warmer slowly. But the exponential curve, the J curve of change and intensity We're at this peak now, and we're evolving as quickly as we can just to maintain this. But there's no horizon where this is getting better. It's just getting more complex. So as the discomfort increases, discomfort is the cure for apathy. Discomfort is the cure for apathy.
Mm. Mm.
Apathy is when it's not in your interests to know something, so you don't invest energy and attention to processing ignorance, right? Or to
Yeah.
treating ignorance. That's what apathy is. It's just
Mm.
not my
Mm.
fucking. That person that we were describing before, that would be apathetic, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Discomfort is the cure for that apathy. It's the
Mm.
universal cure. Therefore, extreme discomfort is the cure for extreme apathy. And what we have is 8 billion people embroiled in a project where the delta between what we have the power to do versus what we have the wisdom to do that with is getting so big and so dangerous that we are going to cause ourselves existential harm. We are causing ourselves existential harm. People say the sky's always been falling. What did we think was going to happen with all of that momentum, of all the falling for all this time? We've got democratized technology. You can print virus chains in a lab. You can make a nuclear fission project in a university laboratory over a weekend with something that used to take the budget of a small country. Now you can do it in a laboratory in a uni. There's so many ways someone of bad faith could try and just spitefully harm millions of people, billions of people, end the world. People like Elon Musk tweet things like this teenage rebellious brain fart that he has, and in of itself it's an innocuous kind of half stupid statement. But when you have 200 million people with lack of discernment following you, treating you like some form of techno messiah who's the champion of free speech, they say the dangerous things, the most ignorant things. And he's just one person, right?
Mm.
And you get these people that are successful in their platforms to speak. Brett Weinstein, Jordan Peterson, left and right. This is not a political argument.
Mm.
But their addiction to pleasing their audience and this little gripe that they're riding on, that titillation of the audience is dependent on them fighting that fight. So they distend the size of the drama to keep generating that kind of traction, but they become like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. Yeah.
If the world was perfect, what would Jordan Peterson do?
Yeah. Yeah.
He'd have to go find some other drama to peddle, right? And the point is, these are the people agitating this already unstable, incoherent, incompatible operating system that's running on the platform of the human psyche. And everyone's trying to get your attention and also trying to build a brand and trying to get more likes and using the algorithm, and the thumbnails must be like this, and then you have to shift the camera every 15 seconds, or else we are normalizing how to engage with other humans based on a standard of the algorithm, which is a non-human with no soul
So,
that only understands how to capture energy and attention regardless of substance. So we are investing all our energy and attention perfecting these ways, normalizing these ways, repeating these ways of getting each other's energy and attention and capturing it with no guarantee that there's actual substance being passed, actual value being passed. And we're normalizing this. And if we're not doing this, we're distracting ourselves with porn and glamour and celebrities and television and streaming services. None of these are inherently bad in of themselves, but we're not investing in the human species. We're not investing in our future or our legacy, either our own individually or ours collectively.
Rocco, that is a perfect way to talk about maybe the last segment of this conversation now, wherein we started by discussing stable mutual actualization and talking about different questions that people can ask to find their own thing, their own soul, their own self. And now you have described perfectly what is the current situation in which human beings are living right now, right? Now, I, as
Overwhelm.
a person, want to
Mm.
contribute towards the solution of this problem, right? You've described the problem. Now, I, as a person, let's say a listener of this video, is watching and is moved and wants to be a part of the solution. And I'm going to invest my time thinking about what could be my version of stable mutual actualization, right? But I want this solution to be, I want my stable mutual actualization to be a part of this solution.
Me
So,
too. Yes.
right? So, can you walk me through what would that solution look like? I know it's going to be iterative. I know we're going to have to agile it. What what can an everyday person do? What can an everyday person contribute towards the solution? What would that
You
look
know,
like?
honestly, that's not for me to say. That's for because I've got a form of genius in this world, and I tapped into mine by giving myself permission and by asking these questions and by doing the work. I am my kind of genius, but you are your kind, and everybody else is their own kind. And we might not think of it as genius because they can't solve math equations. That's not what genius is. Genius is the gift that you came to give in the world, the thing that beckons you forward, that scratches your itch. That's your
Mm,
genius, right?
mm,
The only way you can pursue that is through craft
mm,
and calling. Craft and calling. Now,
mm,
calling
mm,
is this star in the sky that you are following. It's the voice of the bells that beckon you to prayer. It's the thing in your heart that like keeps you awake at night, that makes you think you wish you could do something to change. That's what a
mm,
calling is.
mm,
Now,
mm, mm,
you can only get closer to that. You journal about it, you pray about it, you meditate on it, you speak about it, you come and speak to someone like me who can help you unpack that calling, or you can explore it yourself in a number of ways. What I will do over the next few months is actually start talking about different kinds of crafts and calling and projects and things. So there's many ways to skin this cat. But one of the main things that we can recognize is that we have a self
mm,
project, we have a
mm,
relationship or a container. In other words, that's the family, the community, the way that we belong to the world in our
mhm,
smallest unit that isn't just ourselves. So that's
mm,
our home, that's our immediate neighbors, that's our close family. It's the container in
mm,
which we flourish as a self. Yeah?
mm, mm,
And
mm,
then there's
mm,
our work in the world, which is our calling. Now, there are crafts to all of those three things. There's a craft as a parent, there's a craft as a father, there's a craft as a husband, there's a craft as a leader. I work on my craft, I work on my form and my flow, and I work on my discernment and my growth and there's many ways of doing that, right? And the world is already full of excellent examples of this. The trick is, how do you integrate those such things and simplify them and condense them into, integrate them into your life
mm,
in the form of craft and calling? What am I doing in the world? What is my calling? One of my callings is to be a good father and a good husband, yeah, or a teacher. Another one of my callings is to share this philosophy with people. Another one of my callings is to guide my own soul, my own welfare, my own integrity and authenticity, and live a life that I'm proud of. I have a calling to do that. It means something to me. Yeah, calling is things that give us meaning, and craft is how we do that. It's the ship that we take, our leadership, our relationship. It becomes a little vehicle that we
mm,
can navigate and repair and keep a captain's log and reflect on our own craft as we go. Our craftsmanship,
mm,
our relationship, our leaderships, our all the ships that we can think of, they become our
mm,
crafts, right?
mm,
And you basically work on craft and calling, and then you have cycles of integration and actualization in all of these things. So the trick becomes how you develop a cadence in your life to fit all these things in. Yeah, and I've got lots of tricks that I can talk about. Not tricks, they skillful ways
practices.
that I've developed of fitting it all in, because that becomes one of the big questions, right? And then also
Mm.
asking yourself more challenging questions as you go. Is that helpful answer?
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is, Rocco. Yeah, yeah.
But the main thing is to know thyself so that you can
Mm,
understand what crafts and what callings resonate most with you.
mm,
And here's a trick to everyone: authenticity has to be practiced. You have to find your voice, but you have to find it by using the wrong one. And sometimes
Yeah.
your identity is like a car. When you're young, you have to borrow your parents. Then you get your own. And the first one that you get is not the one that you're going to get forever. And the one that you get in the beginning to rip around with your friends is not the same one you want when you start a family. And your identity is exactly the same way. You have to upgrade, you have to maintain it, you have to track the mileage, you sometimes have to get out and walk
Mm.
to go to certain destinations, which means your identity also becomes, you can't have permanence in that. You have to allow your skin to shed for you to change and evolve as a person. I mean, we can talk forever about such things. But the first thing is taking stock of the one that you're in now and how much of that you inherited, how much of that you chose, how much of that needs maintenance and repair, how much of that needs attention and care, how much of that needs, are you driving it safely? Are you driving it, considerately?
Mm.
Self-knowledge, self-awareness.
That
Yeah,
is the access.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Thank you, Rocco. I think this should be really helpful to anyone who listens to this.
I certainly hope so, man. Because it's such high time that these ideas live in the world. It's no good sitting with me. And my philosophy began very high-minded and very. It was almost like a psychotic rant that I used to give people. It wasn't skillful, but I was pulling an idea down from the internet of the universe through a very imperfect self,
Yeah.
an imperfect vehicle that I've been trying to work on, and I've made countless mistakes, not the least of which was my rate of transmission and my intensity of transmission. But the ideas are so powerful that even though it cost me so much, I kept going because I want to find a way. I want to find a way for these things to live in the world and still make a living out of it, not make a fortune out of it, but the only way I'm going to do this and devote my life to it is if it can pay my bills. I don't have a choice. Yeah.
True, true. Yeah.
And so I'm grateful for this opportunity to share this, and for you also to have that regulator's trigger or nozzle that speeds up and slows down and steers the inquiry. Because I can't be thinking of all these things and all the people in the world and the project of the future human and be thinking of where every single member of the audience is at the moment. I mean, that must be your craft
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
calling.
And I'm
Yeah.
also trying to get better at that, Rocco. We're
Well,
practicing what we're
that's it. I
preaching.
mean, look how many, you and I have never made a video when I look at it and go, nailed it. I always have room for improvement, which is a pain working with someone like me. It really
I
is. But,
Yes, yes, yeah. But yeah,
that,
need that. You remember the consciousness video, the first part. Man, that was a hard day. It was a hard day for me. I'm telling you right now. I told you that day. It was hard for me to listen to it. My wife was there near me, and she was just asking me what happened, what happened, and I just could not even explain because I know I shouldn't take it too personally. I know that we were making mistakes, but it's like when you do something with heart alignment and it still doesn't land, there's a part of you that knows
dude,
that it should have been
that's
better,
my
but
life. Okay. And
yes,
I've,
yeah,
I've been so hard to take feedback,
yeah, yeah,
especially when I'm so aligned to my craft and my calling.
yeah,
But unfortunately, just like you, like you have to eat times and go, oh my God, I hate
yeah,
this, but they're right. I hate it, but they are right.
exactly, that's
And
it, that's it,
that's how
yeah,
it's craft and calling. That's how
yeah,
you know, because
yeah,
the difference between creating content and delivering craft is everything right now. And what you are watching on the internet is an enormous proliferation of content,
content,
but
yeah,
you're not watching development of craft. In fact,
yeah,
perversely, some people are developing the craft of subverting other people's attention and energy.
that
So,
is true, man,
but
yeah,
your comparison to them is craft of this kind takes devotion, heart alignment, investment, many hours of self development, personal development, investment in tools and techniques, and all the rest of it. And some other use AI. and spin it up like this, and
Tell me about
they'll
it.
outcompete you every time. So we're in
Yeah,
we're in a spiritual war for the human soul here.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
And
for anyone watching up till now, Rocco, I
yeah,
would just want to thank them for their contribution to actually staying with us for this long. And I would expect them to also share it with their friends and families and their communities,
you can
because
only hope. Yeah,
authentic word of mouth is the only way I feel that something
anyway.
like this can actually go out. Yeah.
In fact, let me actually say that, if I may.
Hmm.
Everything that Chetan is doing here, everything that Chetan is doing is, it looks like everything everyone else is doing, which is I'm building a brand, I'm becoming an influencer, I'm getting more likes, I'm getting more clicks. Yes, he's doing that too as a means to an end. It's the end that should matter. And the end is to genuinely actualize as a human being and help other people begin the journey and advance the journey of their own actualization and making peace with their own dharma, making peace with their own reality in the world and who they are, so that they can reach the end of their life and tally up those two columns and say, yes, I have more in the meaning column than in the regret column. That was a well-lived life. And the world that I'm leaving for people, the mark that I'm making is a net positive in this world. Don't we all want that? And it can be lost sometimes because we watch thousands of videos and we just scroll and we don't even bother to like. We don't bother to comment. And I know it takes effort and energy, and God, I'm responsible for that too. But the only way that his work gets traction in the world is if somebody stops and says, let me take the energy to just say thank you. Just say thank you. Just like. Just share it. Yeah.
Thank
Because
you, Rocco.
if we can do that, your act of rebellion to say algorithm, how you choose, how you behave with discernment and with compassion and with interest in this project, how you contribute to a project like this, makes such a profound difference and actually can train the algorithm. The algorithm doesn't care. It doesn't only
Yeah.
want to do the bad thing. It'll do anything for a result. We can actually steer and create the internet that we want by the quality of our choices. So
Yes.
that's an
Yes.
invitation to stop this and like it and share it and just leave a comment. The only comment you leave is thank you, or I don't
Yeah.
agree with you, or something.
Yes.
But take a
From
few
the heart.
seconds to do that. Yeah,
Something
from
from
the
the
heart.
heart.
Say whatever you feel
Yeah.
is true.
Yeah. That's it, Rocco. I thank you again from the bottom of my heart, man, to take the time out of your life and actually do what you do. Because I can tell you, man, there are only, I can't even count anyone else who is as aligned as you are that I know personally. I don't know anyone else right now. And therefore, I love you for that, man. And thank you for taking the time and thank you for doing whatever it is that you're doing. And I hope anyone who's watching right now goes through Rocco's work as well. This is not you scratch my back, I scratch yours. This guy has literally put in hours of work into his Substack, into his website, into his podcast, into the videos
Years,
that he has released.
years of work.
And I can guarantee if you're watching with an open mind and an open heart, you will not regret a single minute of the time you spend on his stuff. You will not. And that's the admiration I have for you, Rocco. So thank
Thank
you.
you, Chetan. It's been a work of devotion, but it's cost me enormously because I've not been very skillful in the way that I'm giving and sharing and guiding people to ways that we can engage more closely. And so I have to, it's a part of my craft that
Yeah.
I'm going to be working on now. But I've rebuilt my website, so roccojarman.com, and it's much simplified. And there's links to how to find my writing and my appearances on other podcasts, my books, such things.
Yes.
And I'm actually going to start with a newsletter. So I'm inviting, if anybody wants to be part of a journey like this, sign up for the newsletter there, and I'll stay in touch and I'll keep you posted on the journey as it unfolds. And there will also be tools, practices, offerings, things that you can actually use to apply this wisdom, this
Yeah.
everyday wisdom, everyday philosophy
Yeah.
in your life, in all aspects of your life, self, relationship, and
Relationship.
containers, and your
Yeah.
work.
And Rocco, you will always have a permanent place on the unlearning playground or whatever shape this takes. You know that. I know that. And yes,
Even
we'll
when
keep
I
doing
give you
this.
shit about fonts.
Especially then, man, because I need
Okay.
it. I need it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Okay, Rocco. Thanks a lot, man. Cheers. Bye.